Okay, here we go. I'm deciding to do the political compass test for this video. And before I begin, I'm going to tell you what my prediction is. I'm going to lean towards libertarian right, most likely. But I'm just going to straight up say I don't think this is the most accurate test, as I've seen some of the questions seem like very badly put together or like, stupid as hell. But I'm going to take it right now and I'm just going to very quickly get through it. Okay. If economic globalism is inevitable, should it primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations? 100% agree. Like, that's a question that's pretty easy because, corporations serve people by giving them a product or something in exchange that they find valuable. That's the biggest thing about a corporation. They should do that. For example, what does Walmart give you that's valuable? It gives you food, it gives you a variety of objects you can put in your house. It gives you pretty much like the, bare minimum, most basic necessities for a lot of different hobbies, such as exercising, such as riding bikes, such as like toys, video games, and all that. Pretty much just the bare minimum, like average amount that you pretty much need before you go to another store that has a far more specific or even bigger category of certain things you want. And that's what I think of Walmart as a very good one, especially when it comes to food. It pretty much is the most well known, well gone to supermarket in all of America. One of the biggest companies that hire people all across America. And yeah, I think it was like 3 million jobs or more that Walmart made. Yeah. Anyways, next one. I'd always support my country whether it was right or wrong. This one is gonna have to be disagree. Because if your country is wrong, you obviously shouldn't support it. There were times, like, for example, the Iraq war that was very unpopular because 9/11 happened. The Taliban was in Afghanistan, and yet we went to Iraq instead. And, there are times like that where if your country does something bad, you should not really want to express, a way of saying, hey, you're doing great, let's keep going, because no, that's bullshit. You should be able to criticize your country if you think it's going in a direction you don't personally like yourself. Let's see. No one chooses their country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. I actually disagree. The thing is, while you don't choose your country of birth or your skin color or, how well off or bad off you are, because Mother Nature does that for you whether you like it or not in general. What it does instead is, it gives you a country to live in. You shouldn't hate your country. You should, because you're going to grow up in its culture, you're going to grow up in its teachings. And there are obviously countries that are worse than other countries, but in my general preference, I think most cases it should be disagree unless it's from, very specific horrible backwards countries that exist. Let's go to the next one. Our race has many superior qualities compared. Oh my god. This one's obviously no. This one's, you know exactly where it's going. It's basically gonna say, oh, do you like Nazis, all that shit. No. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I'll put disagree. Some cases, they're not our friend. Like, that's just a general rule of law. Like, for example, like Mexico is not really considered an ally of Russia, but at the same time, Mexico is not really a friend of ours either. It's like one of those cases where it should be disagree, really. Next one. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. This one I'm going to say agree because I'm going to tell you the truth. There's a lot of countries that break international law, like Russia, Ukraine, U.S., Iran. No, wait, no. U.S., Iraq. There's a lot of stuff like that. But the biggest answer is if you're big enough and more powerful enough for international law not to really be enforced on you, like the U.S., Russia, and China are really, then it's like other countries just have to deal with the fact that they can't do anything. And it is a sad reality where if you're a smaller country and that happens to you, you are going to get like a very bad end of that stick. Because if you do anything, these guys can just implement their power over you. And I know, it's unfair a lot of times. Like, for example, Russia, Ukraine is pretty much unfair because Russia's a big nation attacking a small nation. And most likely, Russia is going to get a lot of Ukraine in exchange for it, and it's one of those cases where it just sucks, but it's a reality sometimes. Let's see. There is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment, and I agree with that. Right now, there's a lot of misinformation, false media, and like people basically creating their own echo chambers to feed their egos, circle jerk each other. Like a lot of the mainstream news medias have not been in the interest of the American people, but rather in the interest of their own ideology and propaganda. So most news stations have a agenda, and then they put the facts in order to fit that agenda they have. And a lot of people that just can't get out of that bubble just exist where the media wants them, brainwashed, thinking about what they want, rather than figuring out that, hey, some stories you're actually being lied to pretty much all the time. Kind of like how CNN ignored, or like the cases I would say is like how CNN ignored a lot of the news that happened the last 2 months, and it was absolutely disgusting of them. And they did it in order to serve their interests because if they obviously play something that goes against what they want to dictate to you, they're not going to play it. And thankfully, Twitter is getting in the back of that where it's forcing a lot of these companies to take accountability for it. But in general, I think a lot of the media is just like, it's just bullshit at this point. Let's see. Okay. People are ultimately divided more by class than nationality. I would say at this point in time, I would say it's pretty much the opposite. People are now being put into groups where if you don't agree with this, you're evil. For example, you know how there's citizens, immigrants, visa holders, and illegal immigrants. And yet they'll say, oh, all these people are exactly the same. And then they'll say, all these people are like Mexican, Spanish, whatever. And they'll try to group you in a bubble. But then they'll also do that with white people. They'll say, oh, all these people are evil. They're trying to destroy the country. Right now, as current tensions are, I 100% believe that people are more divided by nationality. Yeah. So I'm going to put disagree for this one, at least for now. Maybe if it was in the 90s, it would have been different, but as the political climate is, it's very bad in a lot of cases. Let's see. Controlling inflation was more important than controlling unemployment. And for this one, I have to say it's actually really hard to control unemployment, like extremely difficult. As unemployment usually comes during recessions and all that stuff. So controlling the economy, I would say, is far better because employment usually comes immediately after. Like, for example, World War II had a huge amount of unemployment. Then, the moment World War II was ended, jobs everywhere. People were earning lots of money. Like, everyone was just happy. They were making a lot off of, like, the World War II after era of America. So I'd say controlling inflation is far more important, at least in my eyes. Okay. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. I agree with this to a certain extent because, like, let's be honest, like a lot of companies that employ illegal immigrants are there only to exploit them, force them to work harder, and stuff like that. What I agree is there should be a basic set of human rights that every company must follow, and if they don't, they must be made an example out of, like sued to oblivion, or even like the government just takes it over in order to show people that you can't get away with doing something like that. Because in general cases, companies are more interested in money than they are of human rights. And that isn't true of all companies across the board, but in general, it is. And as I said, like the government just has to do a basic minimum to make sure all civilians are not being taken advantage of and hurt. And that's what I believe for that. From each according to his ability to each according to his need is fundamentally a good idea. That is an oddly put word or sentence. From each according to his ability to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. Let's see. Oh, Marxist theory. Oh, hell no, hell no. Strongly disagree. Then fuck. Not. I don't believe in Marxist theory. Fuck that. Okay. The freer the market, the freer the people. I actually strongly agree. A free market really helps out people and gives freedoms to people. As long as the government makes sure to ensure a lot of human rights and a lot of implementations of that mixed with a free market, the market basically serves to help the people. Whether it's giving them jobs, giving them high paying jobs, or giving them a product or service that they want in exchange, that's what I believe that is best for people. It's a sad reflection in our society that something as basic as drinking water is now bottled, branded a consumer product. I would say kind of, but at the same time, like if people want bottled water, they can buy it because there's a lot of like restaurants and companies that actually just do give it for free. Like parks give it for free, airports give it for free, at least in drinking fountains. But in general, I'd see a lot of bottled water as more maybe people want the luxury of bringing it with them, and I would say disagree mainly. Like this one's too like vague for me to really choose either side too much. Land shouldn't be a commodity bought and sold. I strongly disagree. I believe land being bought and sold, and actually wait, I'll put disagree. Yeah. I believe in most cases it is good to sell land because property owners, the moment they have property, it helps generational wealth, it helps keep their family together, and it helps them gain things, make companies, and, it's basically their land. You're basically guaranteeing that they can keep this land because they bought it from themselves. Obviously, there are issues within things like some people just buy up too much land, and land isn't an infinite commodity, and there are methods we can do to solve that, but as of right now, currently, I'm just going to leave it as disagree. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. Yeah, I agree. Self explanatory, but it's one of those things that kind of suck. Like George Soros, for example. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. I agree. I agree. Sometimes you just have to protect your products, and it's just a fact. Like for example, patents. Like patents, they give the person who invented it a way to make money off of something they worked hard for, and it's one way to reward them. Only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to the shareholder. I would say mainly disagree. I believe the responsibility should be a mix of giving back to the shareholder as well as giving back to their workers. Because if they treat their workers badly, they're obviously just going to have people coming in and out and leaving without really benefiting or doing anything substantial to the company. If you treat your workers well, then your workers treat their jobs well, then you get money, and in exchange, then you could give it to the profit holders. But I believe actively detrimenting your workers is bad in terms of companies. The rich are too highly taxed. I agree. The majority of taxes are paid by 7% of Americans, and it's 93% of all the taxes made. Obviously, there are a lot of taxes which, for example, they're paid by like shares of stocks and all that. And whenever people say tax the rich, they're talking about in terms of paychecks or like money earned through those means, which usually screws over the middle class because of course it does every single time, and I think that's a piece of shit. So I would say So for this, I would specifically say if this was talking about the middle class, I would agree. Whereas the rich, a lot of them have stocks and ways to avoid taxes, or just really good people who are good at filing taxes for them, which make them take advantage of things that others cannot. Let's see. Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. I agree. Like, I agree there should be a bare minimum standard that a lot of people get, but at the same time, if you have more money and you want to pay more for, care, you should be able to have the right to do that. Government should penalize businesses that mislead the public. I agree. I agree, such as the media, things like that. Because, like, if you're paying them government money, funding them in order to tell the news, and they basically do nothing but smear and tell lies or tell things that aren't factually true, it's I think at that point it's no. Because, like, a free press is good, but a lot of the press seems to be more based off of propaganda than being free. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of the predator multinationals to create monopolies. Yeah. For this one, I would agree to a certain extent, but there are examples where just, breaking up a monopoly has actually created people to have more influence. Like, for example, the Rockefellers, they went from just being extremely rich in one oil monopoly to having their hands on pharmacies and every little aspect of the government. And then they made like charities, pharmacies, like trains, a lot of stuff. And there are some cases where it actually leads to monopolies becoming stronger because now they have influence over so many smaller markets that it sucks. Let's see. Now look at some of your personal social values. Abortion, when the woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. And for this one, I'll say in most cases, yes. There are obviously some cases that, things happen where you can say no, but generally, the life of the baby should be preserved and it should be cared about. And my thought of it is if she wasn't like forced to do something, or it wasn't like something that or if it isn't something that threatens her life and threatens to hurt her or the baby, I think in most cases it should always be illegal. All authority should be questioned. I strongly agree. A lot of authority should be questioned. That is the American way. You look at the government, you look at like politicians, you look at stuff. You should be questioning things that they do, questioning what they can and can't do for you. And, it's just the American way. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Now, for this, I would disagree because this question is just way too vague, exactly, in order to really tell, because we have law and order, so we should process things that way, but this question is just so vague to the point I just can't agree with it fully. It's just too vague. It's badly put together and way too vague. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. I actually disagree a bit. If it's museums of American history, things like that, I agree they should be kept up. I just agree they should be kept up. Like American history, or maybe like houses of certain founding fathers, statues of things, like things like that, I agree with. Because, it's part of our history and we shouldn't just like not fund certain things. Schools should not make the classroom attendance compulsory. I agree. I agree. Not much to be said there. All people have their rights, but it's better off for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. What the fuck? Okay, that. What the fuck? Why? Oh my god. That's obviously one of those questions. I'm just gonna bet it. If you pick strongly agree, it's probably gonna put you more to the right because of how terrible this question is structured. And I'm just gonna say this is a bullshit question that should not even be here. This absolutely sucks. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. I agree. There are a lot of spoiled children that never really had like to deal with real life or real consequences before, and you know how they turned out. They're spoiled brats in public. They make a mess of everything. They throw trash and food everywhere. And then when finally law and order hits them, they freak out and genuinely don't know what's happening to them because they think that they're above the law, they're above rules, they're above society. So they're spoiled, they're bratty and all that stuff. I agree. Parents have to sometimes spank their children. It's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. I agree. Like as a parent, I know a lot of people like helicopter parents might not want that, but there are times your child will hide something from you and never tell you, and you're just gonna have to accept that because if they don't want to tell you, they're not gonna tell you. It's just that's just that simple. Because them telling you a secret or something they feel insecure about means they put enough trust and faith in you that you will do the right decision as a parent or lead them to the correct way. That's what I think. Possession of marijuana for personal use should not be criminal offense. I agree. I agree with this one. Here's my take on a lot of the drugs that don't, have horrendous effect on the human body and like turn you into mindless zombies. I agree with them. I just don't agree with the public use of them. I agree the use of in your property and or areas that allow them. One thing I strongly think people should be jailed for is if they share it with someone who is, not allowed to have it, such as children. I 100% believe people should be jailed if they ever try to do something like that. Or, give it to someone who, giving it to someone who, like, isn't allowed or doesn't know the effects of it. I think in most cases that's just bad. If they're an adult, that's one case, but if they're a child, that's another case where if you give it to them, you deserve to be put in jail. Okay. The prime function of schooling should be to equip future generations to find jobs. I'm actually going to say disagree. Because school teaches you to be a mindless zombie, do what people ask, do what you're told. The bell rings you out. It's, 8 hours plus 30-minute lunch. And that's basically what every single job is. And I think in most cases, it actually is a detriment because if it doesn't teach you finances, if it doesn't teach you personal accountability, if it doesn't teach you how to do taxes, how to invest, how to plan for the future, school basically is just failing those students on every front then. Let's see. People with serious inheritable diseases should not be allowed to. Oh my god. Okay. Strongly disagree. Like, this is what I'm going to say. These people have their right to choose whether or not they want to. As long as it doesn't include incest, that is. Incest should be illegal. So, actually, I'll put it in disagree. Yeah, I'll put it in disagree. But anything beyond that, I think they should be allowed to breed, and I think it's just fucked up because it's basically saying, "Hey, do you want to kill off these people?" And the answer is no. The most important thing for children to learn is accept discipline. I disagree. The most important thing for children to learn is to be free thinkers, be able to debate, as well as have free will, but also learn laws, learn to stay within the laws, and then learn to live in a society where not everyone has the exact same thoughts and opinions as you, rather than living in echo chambers. Yeah, no. There are no savage and civilized peoples. There's only different cultures. I disagree. A good example is Iran versus the US. Iran uses the money it gets to fund terrorism rather than help its own people. Like, that's enough on its own to really prove that wrong easily. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society's support. To be honest, I agree with that. If you're able to work and you just want to be like a drain on society, I don't really think there's I don't really think we should be funding to help you. There are cases where, if someone's born disabled and they can't do anything, that's vastly different than someone who's fully capable and just unwilling to do anything and just wants to leech off of society because it's the easy way out for them. But yeah. When you are troubled, it's better to not think about it, but keep busy with more cheerful things. I no, I think I strongly disagree. I think if you're troubled, you should look at the situation and what it is. Because if you're troubled specifically about your finances and not being able to pay your house, you have no choice but to focus on it. I think that you should focus on what troubles you first, then decide your next plan of action, because if you keep putting things back, eventually you're just going to be crushed by an avalanche of things you failed to take into account. So hell no. First generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their new country. And this one I'm going to say yes, but it's one of those cases where I'm not saying it's not possible at all. I'm just saying in most cases you see a lot of second generation like immigrants or like young children who grew up in a new country translating for their parents, basically telling their parents what people are saying in English and translating to them in that language. And it happens with a lot of families, like even like my side, like some people in my family, they only speak Spanish and barely know any English, so I have to translate from both languages in order to tell them exactly what's happening. What's good for the most successful corporations is always ultimately good for all of us. I would say disagree. Yeah, this one's a little too vague for me to really go too deep into it, but yeah, no. No broadcasting institution, however independent, its content should receive public funding. Huh? No, I disagree. I disagree. If you want to publicly fund certain media sites, I think you should be able to, but I think it should not like tell people's names or who is funding you. I think it should be that independent media should base itself off of what they think their beliefs are and off of facts. I don't think, paying people in order to have a certain narrative that you like is the right answer. So I'll put disagree for that one. And by how you see the wider society. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterror. Yes, yes, yes. Spying on all Americans. Like, there's a lot of stuff like that that exists. Where, for example, during Bush's administration, he spied, he tampered, and he looked into Americans' lives, had the FBI search things. This also happened during Joe Biden, where they censored the media, anything related to COVID, anything you said was gonna be taken off the map, or if you like even judged vaccines, like they would have you scrubbed and the media would not tell you anything in specific. Like I think there are a lot of times they do that, so I'll put strongly agree. A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay process and democrat. No, one-party state is basically just socialist or communist states that's exactly what they do. One party, one control, no say, no variety. You're just screwed over. Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. I strongly disagree with that statement. Like I think looking into people who've done nothing wrong is like, to be honest, a violation of a lot of rights. And hell no, just hell no. That is a shitty argument. Hell no. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. I agree. I strongly agree. Like if you do things like rape, murder, like a lot of these things that are horrible or mass shootings, I think the death penalty should be an option. I think it should be excluded at all times related to things like misdemeanors or, like small, very small, like things that you fuck up. Like getting a parking ticket and all that should not be related to this. I agree, like, in most serious crimes, it should be applied. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. Oh my god. Disagree, 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 disagree. Hell no. That sounds like communism. Okay, let's go next. Abstract art doesn't represent anything and shouldn't be considered art at all. Disagree. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. Oh, this one's a hard one because it depends on the crime. If, well, I'll put agree for some cases because there are times people that like you want to rehabilitate them, but if you keep leaving them out in society, like you know what happened. You know what happened. Released 14 times, stab a girl on the train, like things like that obviously should not be accounted for. Like, for example, El Salvador, it used to have a huge crime problem. Then he put 80,000 people in jail, and now suddenly their society is far better, far more efficient, and far safer. So I'll put agree, but not in all cases. It's a waste of time to try and rehabilitate some criminals. Yeah, I agree. Some people, like, if they keep committing, like, violent acts, keep hurting people, like, I think eventually you get to a point where you realize they're not going to change. Yep. The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. I disagree. The writer and the artist are the people that make the product, therefore, their opinion should be taken into account far more often than the businessman or the manufacturer. I agree in most cases, yes. If you're talking about like, anime or like TV shows or stuff, the artist should have their opinion and what they want more in consideration than the company. Because like there are times when editors make things better, but in general cases, I think tampering with products in order to like enforce something that the writer doesn't want or need in it is just bad. Others may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. I would put disagree. I think it's fully dependent on the two people that are dating each other in order to decide how their relationship works, what rules they have, and how they want to apply it. I think it's fully up to them, so I'm just gonna put disagree. Almost all politicians promise economic growth, but we should be heed warnings of climate science. Oh my god, strongly disagree. I'm gonna say it. Most climate scientists are just political actors that basically make certain statistics and facts in order to have more government authority and take money from taxpayers and like basically rip off taxpayers and screw them over in exchange. Strongly disagree. There's too many people that write things based off of bad motives or trying to take advantage of people instead of actual genuine concern. Making peace with the establishment isn't. No, 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 no. Hell no. If you go through that, okay, you'll find these propositions on religion a breeze. Okay. Astrology accurately oh my god. No, 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 no. You cannot be moral without being religious. Mhm. To be honest, I'm going to say agree for this one to a certain extent. For example, America, even if you're not religious in America, a lot of the values you have are kind of implemented secondhand through like people that had religion beforehand in a civil society. Like, for example, there's a lot of people that are atheists that do have a certain moral compass that they follow, enforce, and believe, and that's simply because a lot of religious impact has made them have that certain moral value. even if they themselves aren't, religious. There's other people that like grew up in the same culture that religious people did that eventually they benefit from by having people not attack, kill, and do certain things to each other because they believe that certain rules are basic for society to follow. Charity is better than social security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. Okay, as for social security, I would actually say yes in the majority of cases. And I'm not saying social security isn't useful. I'm just saying in the majority of cases, I agree more with charity because the other one is enforced by the government, whereas this one is out of the kindness of your heart. And I think I'm going to tell you the truth. Most people are greedy. Most people are spoiled. Most people are like genuine pieces of crap that only care about their own selfishness rather than other people's selfishness. But you can't enforce them to really give up too much of their money that doesn't really go to, helping them in their lives. It's something that you should want to do, but not be forced to do because someone's holding a gun to your head saying you have to do it. I do agree in like society's most vulnerable, like people that have genuine disadvantages or they were born just a way that they can't work. I do agree protections for them should be implemented. Just because, there really is no other choice. Some people are naturally unlucky. I would say no, I would say disagree. I'm going to say this from an American perspective, but the majority of people make their lives the way they want to. For example, you're genuinely unlucky if you had 18 years of like bad parents and like, a bad situation that doesn't help you. But if you get out of it and let's say 5, 10, 20 years down the line, your life is either the same or worse, I'd say eventually that responsibility falls on you as the person. And yeah, so I'll put disagree for that one. It's important that my child's schools instills religious values. For this one, I'm going to put disagree. There is freedom of religion, so you should be able to express your own religion. But I would say the way it is should be enforced by everything that the school deems okay to do, you should be able to do. If your religion forces you to do something extreme that like would require hurting people or, doing like something so radical like enforcing your religion on others, I think at that point, no. Finally, a look at sex. Sex outside of marriage is usually immoral. I disagree. Let's see. A same sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. I strongly agree. Because it says stable, loving relationship. They should be able to adopt. I prefer adoption, to be honest, over surrogacy. Just because, there are a lot of kids in adoption homes that need to be taken care of. So I think that option should be prioritized as their method of doing it. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. I agree. It's adults' personal responsibility. I think when it comes to children, that's when you start regulating it and start, stopping it from even appearing to them. But the moment someone becomes a full legal adult, they should be able to decide whether or not they want to see that stuff themselves. What goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is not the business of the state. I 100% agree. 100% agree. No one can feel naturally homosexual. Okay, here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say strongly disagree. Whether you're born gay or choose to be gay, it is your right as a person to really enforce whichever one you believe. So if you want to, go ahead. The days openness about these days openness about sex has gone to oh yes, yes, yes. Like for example, like you see, like, there's sexually explicit content everywhere, especially being exposed to kids. Like, my problem is these things should be held in places like nightclubs or, like, for adults only. I think the problem is too many people are willing to exploit kids and, like, show them this stuff that they shouldn't be seeing in the first place. I think that's where I have the huge problem with it. Like, a lot of pride parades have that huge problem where they force kids to see all the stuff that they're not supposed to see, and I don't agree. Yeah, I don't agree with, like, showing them that. I see where I stand. Blah blah blah. What the fuck? Yeah, libertarian right. As I said, I was gonna be there, and it obviously makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. So this is my score, and yeah, that's pretty much all. So, boom. And the good part about being like a libertarian in this scale, in most cases, is that if like people are libertarian right or libertarian left, usually we tend to agree on a lot more things. Whereas when you get to authoritarian right or left, that's when the higher you get in authoritarian, the like less and less the blur between left and right really become, because by this point you start doing a lot of the same things, which is like, for example, Nazis and socialists. They're both authoritarian, so they're pretty much just 99% of the same stuff with maybe a few differences. But when you get to libertarian, I'd say it's great, except there is a certain level where being too libertarian is bad, like basically saying, oh, people should be able to do whatever they want no matter who they are at all times. And I think that's the part where it also becomes a problem. Like, this would be, oh, you should be able to do this, that because you can. Because like for example, society children are society's most vulnerable, and if you have that mindset, eventually you're gonna like lead to a very destructive ideals for them in general. So yeah.